You have done the shadow work. You sat with parts of yourself that you were ashamed of. You've named the wound. You traced them back to childhood. You studied psychology. You did the inner child work. You've integrated, or at least you tried, and something shifted. You feel more whole now than you used to. But there's still this pain, this quiet, persistent feeling that you haven't arrived yet, that something deeper is still calling you, and you don't know what it is. But it doesn't feel like another wound to heal. It feels like something pulling you forward. Most people assume that that pull is toward more healing. So they go deeper into the wound. They find another layer, they integrate it. And the pull is still there because the pull was never towards the wound. It was towards something the wound was covering, something that has no name in psychology. But the mystics, they spend their entire lives trying to point at it, trying to name something that has fallen apart the moment that you put into words. And I'm gonna try. And here is what no one in the psychology space is gonna tell you. That pain, that pull, that is not your psyche asking for more healing. That is your divinity asking to be recognized. Carl Jung had this idea called individuation. And the basic premise is simple. There is a version of you underneath all the masks, underneath the identity you built so people would accept you, underneath the version your parents needed you to be. And individuation is just the slow and sometimes painful movement towards that. And this is real. This is not wrong. When you stop performing the version of yourself that kept the peace, when you stop abandoning yourself just to belong, and when you start actually feeling things instead of just managing them, that's it. That's what it looks like, and that matters. And here is where psychology draws the line in the sand. It says the goal is wholeness. You're integrating the parts of yourself. The self is the center of your psyche, and then it stops. Because psychology, as a field, doesn't like to go past the edge of the human. It stays safely inside the psyche. But Carl Jung himself, if you actually read him, he couldn't stay there either. He kept bumping into something that wasn't just psychological, something that mystics had a word for. And here's what I find fascinating. This was a man who built his entire career on the scientific study of the mind. And somehow, he spent the last decade of his life deep in alchemy, mysticism, and the I Ching. He kept arriving at something bigger than the map that he started with. And in his private writing, especially the Red Book, he wasn't describing psychology anymore. He was describing something that sounded a lot like initiation. There is one question that no therapist is going to ask you, not because it's wrong, but because it goes past the edge of their map. The question is, who is the one integrating? I mean, think about it. You are doing the shadow work, you're integrating your anger, your grief, your fear, your shame, but who is holding all of that? Who is the awareness that sees the wound and also sees the healing? Who is watching your ego collapse and rebuild? Who is still there even when the persona crumbles? even when the identity that you build falls completely apart. Jung calls it the self, but mystics across every tradition have a different answer. And the answer is not something you find, it's something you recognize. In Eastern Orthodox Christianity, there is this concept called theosis, divinization. It means becoming through grace what God is by nature, not losing yourself, not dissolving into nothingness, but becoming more yourself. Because your real self was always the one rooted in something divine. In Vaidya Vedanta, one of the oldest philosophical traditions of the planet, their teaching is Atma is Brahman. The individual self is the universal self, not similar to it, not a reflection of it, but the same. And Meister Eckhart, a 13th century Christian mystic, said, "The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. One seeing eye, one eye. There's no separation." Now bring this back to Carl Jung. He was obsessed with the alchemists. And people always asked why. Why would a man like that care so much about medieval pseudoscience? Because he understood that alchemy was never about turning literal lead into literal gold. It was about transformation and becoming something more true. The lead was the uninitiated self, the unexamined self, the dense, the unconscious self. And the gold wasn't perfection, it was illumination. And the part that matters most is the alchemist was not separate from the experiment. They were the experiment. So why does any of this matter practically? Because the frame you're holding determines how far you're willing to go. If individuation is just integration, just becoming more whole, then there is a ceiling. You heal the wound, you integrate the shadow, and you become a more authentic version of yourself. And you arrive at a better you, which is genuinely good, and that matters. But if individuation is divinization, then the healing is not the destination, but it's the path. Every wound becomes a doorway, not just a healed self, but to a deeper recognition of what you are underneath the self. Every time you sit with your shadow instead of running, you remove a layer of false identity. Every time that you stop performing and just be, something that was always there becomes slightly more visible. And the healing stops feeling like repair work and starts feeling like excavation. Like you're not fixing something broken, but like you're removing everything that was never you, until what's left cannot be named, cannot be wounded, and cannot be taken from you, because it was never constructed in the first place. This is why people who go really deep into this work describe a point, usually after something has completely fallen apart, where they stop grieving what they lost. Not because they suppress the grief, but because something underneath the grief became more real than the thing that they lost. They touched something in themselves that doesn't change, that has never changed, that was watching quietly, patiently, through every version of them that rose and fell. And that's what you're moving toward. Not just wholeness, but recognition. The hermit, the archetype this channel is built around, is not a figure of isolation. The hermit is the one who turned inward, not to escape the world, but to find the light that makes the world visible. In the tarot, the hermit holds a lantern. But if you look closely, the lantern is not coming from outside. The lantern is just the vessel. The light comes from within, and that's you. Not the wound, not the mask, not the healed version of the wound, but the light that was shining before the wound ever happened. In all of that work, the shadow work, the nervous system work, all of it is just the process of becoming clear enough to see that the light was never extinguished. It was just covered. And this video is the beginning of a series I'm building here, following the thread of the self as divinity. Inner alchemy, not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual aesthetic, but as a lived, embodied path towards recognizing what you have always been. And we're going to go deep, deeper than most people are willing to go. And if you're tired of the surface level, if you have done the work and you still feel that pull towards something that you can't name, you're in the right place. Subscribe and stay, because what comes next is what inner work was always pointing towards. The hermit doesn't hand you a map. The hermit holds the light just far enough ahead that you can see the next step. And that's all you need. Take the step. I'll be here.